situation in order that they will incorporate into this plan, incorporate into what is brought before us, a commitment locked in to go forward with comprehensive tax reform, and we believe the Wyden-Coates plan is the place to start. I thank my colleague for his efforts, and I'll turn it back to him to conclude this colloquy.
Mr. President, I thank my friend from Indiana. He makes a number of important points that we want to make sure are considered as the discussion about taxes goes forward. For example, Senator Coates pointed out on this question of changing just the corporate tax alone, what are essentially C corporations. The reality is the vast majority of businesses in this country are not C corporations. They are partnerships, limited liability corporations, sole proprietorships. They're about 80% of the businesses in this country. So Senator Coates has made the important point that to really bring about tax reform, you can't just go with corporate taxation. You've got to get at the needs of millions and millions of these small businesses. And I would just note that Chairman Bernanke was asked about this in the Budget Committee, and he said specifically that it was important to do comprehensive reform in order to generate the best opportunity for economic growth and job creation rather than corporate reform alone. Senator Coates also makes an important point as we wrap up about the temporary nature of our tax code and how frustrating that is to American business that needs to have some capacity to predict what's ahead to generate jobs. The Wall Street Journal reported the other day that the only thing permanent about the American tax code is that it's temporary. And we have more than quadrupled the number of temporary provisions in the tax code in just the last few years. And that uncertainty discourages businesses from investing in growth and hiring, as Senator Coates has noted. And that's why it's going to be important to look at the tax code in a comprehensive way, both for individuals and corporations, so that going forward, all our taxpayers have some sense of predictability and certainty about what their tax treatment will entail. My last point is I recently had a chance to talk to one of the veterans of the 1986 tax reform debate, and we visited about some of the circumstances involved in that historic reform and some of the challenges ahead. And when he was done, he said, "What in the world is holding people up from getting going on this? What's really holding everybody up? We know what we need to do." There have been commissions, a whole host of them. President Obama had an excellent one that agreed with much of what we've talked about this afternoon. I thought President Bush's, George W. Bush, had a commission that was chaired by several of our former colleagues. I thought much of their proposal was on point. And that's why what one of the veterans of that 86 reform legislation had to say to me, what's holding people up is so important. As Senator Coates noted, you're not going to do comprehensive tax reform between now and August 2nd. Everybody understands that. But there is absolutely no reason, Mr. President, in order to come together in the United States Senate with an approach that doesn't add to the federal deficit, with a proven track record of helping to advance economic security, that between now and August 2nd, as part of these budget negotiations, there's no reason why in that agreement we shouldn't lock in a strategy for getting on to tax reform in the fall and in the remainder of this Congress. So I thank Senator Coates. He mentions Senator Gregg. I feel so fortunate to have had two colleagues. We were in the House together. We're having an opportunity, Senator Coates and I, to work together on this in the Senate. And I think we have always, felt that you ought to focus on what really works rather than the default strategy of rehashing old arguments and just having these partisan fights. So I thank Senator Coates. We'll have our eye on the effort between now and August 2nd to make sure that tax reform gets the place it deserves for the fall and the remainder of the Congress. I thank my friend from Indiana. Mr. President, with that, I yield the floor.
Mr. President. The Senator from Maryland.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, last night, S-185, a resolution that was co-sponsored by about 90% of the Senate, passed the Senate by unanimous consent. And I'm very grateful to my colleagues for their help in developing this resolution. This resolution expresses the strong support for the United States, who are our closest ally in the Middle East, Israel. I was joined in this effort by my good friend, Senator Susan Collins from Maine. The two of us worked together to draft this resolution, and we are grateful that so many members, so many of our colleagues joined us in the process, and that is now passed the United States Senate by a unanimous vote. This resolution, first and foremost, expresses our strong support for Israel, recognizing these are extremely challenging times, expressing our support for peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis, and recognizes that the only way that we're going to be able to move forward on the peace process is through direct negotiations between the Israelis and the Palestinians. And that's the only way that we can resolve these long-standing issues in order to achieve peace in that region. The resolution also reaffirms our opposition to the inclusion of Hamas in any Palestinian unity government unless it is willing to accept peace with Israel and renounce violence. You cannot negotiate with someone sworn to bring about your destruction. And therefore, Hamas's inclusion in a Palestinian government is a non-starter for any possibility for peace. Any unilateral attempt by the United Nations to establish a Palestinian state is detrimental to any final peace agreement. A permanent and peaceful settlement of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict can only be achieved through direct Israeli-Palestinian negotiations. Any Palestinian effort to gain recognition of a state outside of direct negotiations demonstrate their lack of good faith commitment to a peace negotiation. Senate is now firmly on record that this kind of action would be directly counterproductive to peace, and if the Palestinians pursue this, it may well have implications for the continued U.S. participation with the Palestinians. Israel has always been willing to come to the peace table for direct negotiations. Quite frankly, it's been the Palestinians which have been dragging their feet for many months, refusing to have the direct negotiations between the parties, which is the only way that that can be accomplished. Lasting peace can only come through that direct negotiations that settle all outstanding issues to the satisfaction of both sides. Obviously, there's going to be give and take. There has to be give and take. There's got to be mutual respect and security, and that requires active participation in peace talks. The two sides can achieve a peace agreement only when they acknowledge each other's right to exist. That's pretty fundamental. This is particularly critical now for the Palestinians and their unity government that includes Hamas. Unless Hamas fully renounces violence and acknowledges Israel's right to exist, it cannot be a partner in peace, and their inclusion in the Palestinian unity government is a major obstacle. As Prime Minister Netanyahu stated so well in his speech before the joint session of Congress in May, and I quote the Prime Minister of Israel, "I will accept a Palestinian state. It is time for President Abbas," President Abbas, of course, the head of the Palestinians, "to stand before his people and say, I will accept a Jewish state." It is clear that it's in the interest of all parties that there be two states, the Jewish state of Israel and an independent Palestinian state living side by side with secure borders and peace. So let me just again acknowledge what I think Prime Minister Netanyahu said. Israel is prepared to acknowledge a Palestinian state. It's time for the Palestinians to acknowledge the Jewish state. Difficult negotiations need to take place. There are critical issues such as security, power, and water concerns, as well as larger issues of historical, religious, and territorial matters still must be decided. That must take place through direct negotiations between the Israelis and the Palestinians. This is precisely why it's so important to discuss, negotiate, and ultimately resolve these issues rather than taking unilateral action that would leave them unsettled and unsustainable. The real and lasting peace will only occur at the peace table, and I am grateful that the Senate has strongly and unanimously gone on record to affirm this approach. With that, Mr. President, I would yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senator from Rhode Island.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today to join again in the debate occurring here in Washington on bringing our federal budget into balance and facing up to our looming debt limit. Our nation right now is like an overburdened ship wallowing in the seas. We are in danger as a nation of foundering if we don't sort this out. As former Comptroller General David Walker testified to us in the Budget Committee over a year ago, we face, and I quote, large, known, and growing structural deficits that could swamp our ship of state. To get the ship in trim, we need to make adjustments. We need to reduce the deficits and ultimately reduce the debt. We agree on a lot. We need to cut spending. Democrats and Republicans agree on that. We need to protect ordinary families who enjoy ordinary levels of income from tax increases. Democrats and Republicans agree on that. The disagreement here in Washington is whether we also need to raise some revenues for our nation in other areas to help balance our national budget. Areas like oil and gas and ethanol subsidies that we could close and contribute to fixing our budget deficit. Closing corporate tax loopholes, bringing to an end high-income tax dodge schemes. The Republicans are threatening that they would rather sink the boat than raise revenues in those areas. Just this week, Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell called on President Obama to take any revenue raisers off the table and to focus only on spending cuts. In an opinion piece on CNN.com, the Republican leader, Senator McConnell, proclaimed, "Tax hikes can't pass the Congress." Well, let's start with the fact that, as I said a minute ago, we're not talking about tax hikes on ordinary Americans. When Leader McConnell is talking about tax hikes, he's talking about the rates that the wealthiest Americans pay in taxes, often lower than ordinary American families, believe it or not, gas and oil and other subsidies that go to big industries, and tax loopholes that generations of corporate lobbyists have wangled into the tax code. That's what they're talking about when they talk about tax hikes in this context. Let's take a specific look at what the Republicans are fighting so hard to protect. Last month, Republicans filibustered a measure that would have ended $21 billion in unnecessary tax subsidies for the largest oil companies in the nation, companies that have been enjoying record multi-billion-dollar profits and do not need continued support from the American taxpayer. When we tried to break the Republican filibuster, Republicans voted to protect those big oil subsidies, even though they add to the deficit. That happened right here on the Senate floor just a short time ago. To keep our American ship of state afloat, the Republicans are demanding that we cut early childhood education, while at the same time they fight to protect big oil subsidies. Here is a building in the Cayman Islands. It's called Ugland House. This nondescript building really doesn't look like much, but over 18,000 corporations claim that this building is their place of business. 18,000 corporations claim that this building is their place of business. It gives a whole new meaning to the phrase small business to imagine 18,000 corporations fitting into that little building. As Budget Committee Chairman Conrad has pointed out, the only business going on down there in the Cayman Islands is funny business, monkey business with the tax code. It is corporations getting out of paying their responsibilities to this country by hiding behind phony shell corporations down in the Cayman Islands. It's estimated to cost us as much as $100 billion each year to put up with this offshoring tax shelter of income. To keep our ship of state afloat, the Republicans are asking us to cut investments in science and technology that will cure disease for Americans and for mankind. And at the same time, they're fighting to protect corporations that hide in offshore tax havens so the honest American taxpayer has to carry the burden in their place. Here's another building with a story to tell. This is the Helmsley Building on Park Avenue in New York City. We remember Leona Helmsley, who famously said, "Taxes are for the little people to pay." Well, we know something about the Helmsley Building and its taxes because this building is large enough to have its own zip code. And the IRS compiles tax information by zip code. So we know from IRS actual information what the wealthy and successful individuals and corporations that call this building home pay in federal tax each year. And guess what we know? We know that in the last year that was reported for which this has been pulled out, which was 2007, the occupants together of this building, the Helmsley Building, paid a 14.7% total federal tax rate. Actually paid. 14.7%. Mr. President, the average American taxpayer, the average middle-class American pays far higher than that. We hear a lot of talk about how high the tax rates are for wealthy Americans. In real life, when you go to actual examples, 14.7%. How does that compare, for instance, to the people who work in that building? The average New York City janitor or doorman or security guard? Well, far, far lower. They all pay tax rates in the 20 to 25% range, even higher in some cases, on average. Far higher than the high-income occupants of the building. And it's not just because this is the Helmsley Building that this is true. This is not some anomaly. Each year, the Internal Revenue Service publishes a report that details the taxes paid by the highest-earning 400 Americans. I spoke earlier this year on last year's report, which was based on that same year's data, 2007. In that year, these super high-income earners, nearly a third of $1 billion with a B, third of $1 billion earned in income in 1 year, 2007, on average, all 400 of them. In that year, these super high-income earners paid a lower tax rate than an average hospital orderly who's a single filer pushing the cart down the hallways at midnight of Rhode Island Hospital. They paid a lower tax rate on their income than that hospital orderly. In May, the IRS published data on the top 400 taxpayers for 2008. Let's take a look at what happened in this most recent year that they have categorized. In 2008, the top 400 took home an average of $270 million each, more than $250 million each. We can and do applaud the success of these individuals. It is really the American dream to make more than $250 million in a single year. But on average, these 400 extremely wealthy Americans paid an average federal tax rate of just 18.2%. We spent a lot of time around here debating whether the top income tax rate should be 35% or 39.6%. Folks, that's not what they paid. The tax code is filled with special provisions that tend to exclusively or disproportionately benefit the wealthy. So the top 400 income earners paid an average of 18.2%. A single filer at $39,350 of income pays the same tax rate. $39,350, that's where you hit 18.2% and match what the rate that people making $250 million make. And those of us who are in between the truck driver and those Uber billionaires pay far, far higher rates. The average truck driver in Rhode Island, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, is paid $40,200, which means that the average truck driver is paying an as high or higher rate than these top 400 income earners earning over $250 million. To keep our ship of state afloat, the Republicans are asking us to cut employment and training support at a time of record joblessness, while they continue to fight to make sure that people making $250 million a year pay lower federal tax rates than middle-class American families. When all is said and done, everyone agrees that there need to be cuts, and everyone agrees that there should be no tax increases on middle-class American families making up to $250,000 a year. That's already agreed to. Those concerns are not an issue. What's at issue is that the Republicans are willing to sink the ship of state to defend tax rates for billionaires that are lower than those paid by regular, hardworking Americans. The Republicans are willing to sink the ship of state to defend special interest loopholes in the tax code won by big corporate lobbyists. In effect, earmarks. Earmarks that just happen to be in the tax side of the budget rather than in the spending side of the budget. The Republicans are willing to sink the ship of state to defend offshore havens for corporations and high-income earners to dodge taxes. That's where they've chosen to stand and fight. That is where the disagreement is. Not for the middle class that is the backbone of our nation, but for the special interests, the big corporations, and the ultra-rich. When you say that revenues cannot be on the table, that is who you are protecting. That is just a fact. They say that it's tax increases that they're protecting against. The questions Americans should ask when they hear that is, tax increases for whom? For the corporate lobbyists that drove down corporate taxes to the point where significant numbers of American corporations don't pay $1 in taxes? Yeah. There should be tax increases there. We should close those loopholes. Tax increases for people making more than $250 million who pay less than the average working class family as a rate? Yeah, there should be tax increases there. But that's just in the spirit of fairness. Mr. President, it's simply inexcusable that our tax system permits billionaires to pay lower tax rates than truck drivers and allows some of the most profitable companies in the world to pay little or no taxes to support our nation. Even if we had no budget deficits, fairness and equality would demand that we address these inexcusable discrepancies. Our budget crisis, however, brings new urgency to the problem. As we continue to debate ways to close the budget gap, I hope that the Republican leadership and the Republican conference will revisit the potential to significantly cut the deficit by addressing the tax loopholes, tax gimmicks, and frankly, outright injustice to the ordinary taxpayer that they are now defending. I thank the Chair, and I yield the floor.
We actually don't have a copy.
Okay, Mr. President. The senator from Kentucky.
I ask unanimous consent to proceed for a few moments as if in morning business.
Without objection.
If this week has shown us anything at all, it's that the American people can't wait on Democrats to do the right thing when it comes to spending and debt and putting us on a path to balance. So today, Republicans are beginning the Rule 14 process on a balanced budget constitutional amendment. A balanced budget amendment would require that lawmakers stop spending money we don't have. And when we return from the July 4th break, we'll fight for an opportunity to vote for it. We've had a chance this week to see how Democrats in Washington want to deal with the fiscal mess they've helped create by forcing the taxpayers and the job creators to actually bear the burden. Well, Republicans think it's about time Washington bears the burden for a change. Let Washington find a way to balance the books on its own. The American people have paid enough of a price over the past few years for Washington's recklessness. Republicans aren't going to allow Democrats to make them pay even more. Now, Speaker Boehner has already committed to a balanced budget vote in July, so the Speaker and I are united in this effort. Americans can expect all 47 Republicans in the Senate to support this amendment. It's time to put the American people back at the helm of our ship of state, and if that's what this vote achieves, then the debate we're having will have been well worth it. If Washington is forced to finally reform its ways, then we'll all look back and say the American people indeed won this debate. And we'll say that the balanced budget amendment was just the thing we needed to get our house in order. Broke or balanced, that's the choice. Now, Mr. President, I am going to Rule 14, the proposal. I don't think you have it yet. You should have it momentarily. It has miraculously appeared. I understand there's a joint resolution at the desk, and I ask its first reading.
Clerk will read the title of the bill for the first time.
Senate Joint Resolution 23, proposing an amendment to the Constitution of the United States relative to balancing the budget.
I now ask for a second reading, and in order to place the joint resolution on the calendar under the provisions of Rule 14, I object to my own request.
Objection is heard. The bill will be read for the second time on the next legislative day.
I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Wyoming.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to speak for up to 15 minutes as if in morning business.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I come here today to compliment the minority leader, Senator McConnell, for his resolution and our effort to put a balanced budget amendment onto the Constitution of the United States. And I come here today, and I just tell you a little story about a friend of mine from Douglas, Wyoming. I was in Douglas on Memorial Day. They every year Memorial Day in Douglas, they have a sunrise ceremony, services in the cemetery where they raise the flag, go through the names of all of the veterans from Converse County who have passed in the last year, the flag back at half-staff, 21 guns salute, and a time for people to come together and think about this great nation and honor those who have given their lives. After the ceremony this year, people were leaving the cemetery. My friend Bernie Seabaum stopped me. He said, you know, Senator, and we've known each other a long time, and he said, you know, he's on Medicare now, Social Security, lived a long life, contributed to the community. He said, I don't care if you do a number of things, if you raise taxes, cut Medicare, he said, you know, take away Social Security. He said, as long as you use it to pay off this debt, this $14 trillion debt. I said, Bernie, the problem is if Congress ever does something like that, they're going to get the money and they're just going to spend it. And the first thing we need to do is amend the Constitution so that we actually balance the budget. Then you can start talking about ways to pay off this incredible debt that we have. But, you know, in Wyoming, we live within our means, balance the budget every year, and it has paid huge dividends for our state. You know, you think about the Constitution, and our founding fathers produced that greatest governing document, in my opinion, ever conceived. It was written at a time when our country's future was in serious doubt, when our country faced countless threats from abroad, threats that were becoming increasingly difficult to confront, and when the federal government lacked both the structure and the foundation to do anything about it. But there we had the Constitution, written in part as a response to those challenges of the day, and it has endured till this day. So amending the Constitution is not something to be undertaken lightly. The Constitution is the highest law of this great land. It has been amended, but infrequently, and almost always at a time of crisis. Now, I support a balanced budget amendment to our Constitution because now is just such a time. And when the Constitution was written, you know, have to decide what the future would bear. So when it was written, as that time came, we now have to decide what sort of future we want for our country. Do we want a future where our children and grandchildren are overburdened by debt, where the U.S. dollar is backed by nothing more than worthless promises? Or do we want a future where the only things that we can afford to spend money on, what we're facing right now, entitlements and interest on our debt? Do we want a future where our country goes broke, and a future where Washington lacks the political will to do anything about it? Or, Mr. President, do we want a future with less spending, lower taxes, and more accountability? You know, facts are stubborn things, and the numbers do not lie. This month, the Congressional Budget Office released a report saying that the outlook of America's debt is growing grimmer. The Hill newspaper put it best when it said that the new CBO report numbers are, quote, much worse than last year's outlook. To anyone who does the math, this is not a surprise. Every day, Washington borrows $4.1 billion more. Borrowed over $4 billion yesterday, $4 billion today. We will do it again tomorrow. It's over $2 million a minute, every minute. Washington did that yesterday, is doing it today, and will do it tomorrow. Of every dollar that Washington spends, 41 cents of it is borrowed. Much of it is borrowed from China. Every American child born today and tomorrow and the next day is born with an incredible debt of over $45,000. Next year, of every dollar Washington spends, 68 cents will go for Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and interest on the debt. If we as a nation continue down this path, Washington will spend all of what it takes in on these items alone. Everything else, from defense to education, will be paid for on a budget of borrowed money. So, you may ask, where's the money going to come from? And how will we ever pay it back? Well, a lot of it's going to come from other countries, countries who do not always have our interest, America's best interest at heart. John Kennedy stood outside this building in 1961. 50 years ago, he said, "Ask not what your country can do for you." He said, "Ask what you can do for your country." Well, a few years from now, that may change, Madam President. It may change to ask not what your country can do for you, ask what your country must do for China. So consider this. When John Kennedy was president, America's total debt was just over $300 billion, and we only owed 4% of our debt to foreign countries. Today, our total debt is over $14 trillion. And debt isn't just a disaster for the distant future. Our debt, our current debt, is irresponsible, and it is unsustainable. And even our military leaders have condemned it. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Mike Mullen, has said, quote, "The biggest threat to our national security is our debt." The debt is the threat. We do not and we should not take the biggest threat to our national security lightly. The amount of debt that we owe right now today is so high that it is hurting our employment at home. Experts tell us that our current debt is costing us 1 million jobs in America. Well, spending like this makes it harder for the private sector to create new jobs. Because of this, it's harder for American families to buy gas, to buy groceries, to buy cars, homes, to pay tuition for the kids to go to college. And it is harder to create jobs for those kids who will be graduating this year and next year and every year until we get the spending under control. Now, everyone claims in this body claims to understand that the situation is irresponsible and is unsustainable. Back in February of 2009, the President called experts to the White House for what he called a, quote, fiscal responsibility summit. In his opening remarks, this is what the President had to say. He said, contrary to the prevailing wisdom in Washington these past few years, he said, we can't simply spend as we please and defer the consequences to the next budget, the next administration, or the next generation. Well, I agreed with the President. He was right. So my question is to the President, what have you done about it? Well, one thing he's done is he's called together a debt commission. Late last year, the Debt Commission released their report on America's fiscal situation, and the findings were sobering. According to the report, they said, quote, the problem is real, the solution will be painful, there is no easy way out, everything must be on the table. You know what else they said? They also said Washington must lead. Washington has not led. Instead, this administration has offered nothing but empty promises. As the White House makes promise after promise and speech after speech with no action to back it up, it is clearer than ever that in Washington, spoken promises have become broken promises. This persistent push to put our fiscal crisis off until tomorrow is unacceptable and must end now. The first step toward doing that should be to pass an amendment to our Constitution requiring Washington to balance its budget. A balanced budget amendment would require Washington to spend no more money than it takes in each and every year. Such an amendment would force Washington to live within its means. We cannot afford to continue to mortgage our children's future to pay for Washington's fiscal failures. Such an amendment would transform the kind of irresponsible spending that goes on today in this very body into an impeachable violation of every legislator's constitutional oath of office. The American people have overwhelmingly spoken on the wisdom of this approach. A recent poll conducted by Sachs Mason-Dixon shows that 65% of Americans support a balanced budget amendment to our Constitution. And 45% said they'd be more likely to vote for a candidate who did so. Now, of those, 68% of them were independents. But there is support for this among Republicans, among independents, and among Democrats. When the American people call for Washington to lead in numbers this big, it is time for Washington to listen. Every single member of my party on this side of the aisle agrees. That's why all 47 Republican members of this body have co-sponsored the balanced budget amendment. The American people are behind us, and they want us to act. Meanwhile, the administration and its allies on the other side of the aisle have offered nothing but more empty rhetoric, more of the same tax and spend policies that made this economic situation worse. You take a look at where we are and where we have been, they have made it worse. I'm reminded of a quote from Ronald Reagan. He said, if the big spenders get their way, they'll charge everything to your taxpayer's express card. He said, and believe me, they'll never leave home without it. The big spenders can get away with charging everything to the American people's taxpayer express card because no one is forcing them to look at the bills. Now those bills are coming due, and this administration and its liberal allies want a new taxpayer's express card and a blank check. They want a blank check to spend as they desire, and they're not going to get it from me. Not without specific reforms that will introduce accountability into this broken Washington process. A balanced budget amendment will not solve every problem, but it is a critical step in the right direction. It would ensure that Washington is constitutionally obligated to avoid the reckless overspending of the past. Our debt crisis didn't surface overnight, and it certainly won't be solved without a great deal of additional work. Before any of that work can be done, Madam President, Washington has to learn to live within its means the way families all across this great country do. It is time we show the American people that they can trust their government with their money again. It is time we lead today instead of deferring leadership until tomorrow. It is time we show the same courage that our founding fathers did when this country was on the verge of financial collapse. It is time for a balanced budget constitutional amendment. And then, Madam President, I can go back to my friend Bernie and his wife Sally in Douglas, Wyoming, and say, Bernie, finally in Washington, they got it right. They realize, like we do here in Wyoming, you have to live within your means. You have to balance your budget every year, and then start working on paying off this incredible debt. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor.
Madam President.
The Senator from Tennessee.
Should Senator Harkin come in the next few minutes, I'll step aside and let him speak. But in the meantime, I thought I would sum up where we have come this week on the legislation that's been before the body since late last week, and that was to reduce the number of Senate confirmations of presidential nominations so that the Senate can exercise its constitutional duty of advise and consent more effectively. This all goes back to our Constitution, the United States Constitution, Article 2, Section 2, which says that one of the most important duties of the United States Senate is, quote, its advice and consent responsibility. That's one of the well-known functions of the Senate. A famous book was written about advise and consent. And the Constitution says that the President shall nominate, with the advice and consent of the Senate, ambassadors, ministers, judges, other officers of the United States. And today, there are about 1,400 of those of those officers. When President Kennedy was president, there were about 280, more or less. And under President Clinton, there were about 1,100, more or less. It continually grows up. And this includes a large number of part-time advisory positions, such as the Library Advisory Board and a variety of other boards, which is why the founders put into the Constitution another provision which says that Congress may by law vest the appointment of such inferior officers as they think proper in the President alone, in the courts of law, or in the heads of departments. So it's up to us to make sure we don't trivialize the constitutional responsibility we had. So we define the number of men and women whom the President nominates who require advice and consent, and we define the ones who don't. We've not done a very good job of deciding which ones did not. Over the last few days, the Senate has decided to remove 169 of the 1,400 nominations from the advise and consent requirement. It is debating right now removing another 233 full or part-time positions and putting them in an expedited process so that we will have affected 450 or so of the 1,400 nominations, either by removing them from advise and consent or speeding up the process. This will permit us to focus more attention on the job that we're sent here to do, which is to do a good job of evaluating the most important offices. Just one indication of how we've been trivializing the responsibility to decide who does deserve advice and consent and who doesn't is that only about 3% of all of the presidential nominations in the last Congress actually were deemed important enough to have a roll call vote here on the floor of the Senate. 97% were deemed not important enough. And, of course, they were not. They were valuable people, but they were part-time advisory board members who were part of a board where an executive director, for example, already reported to someone who was confirmed by the Senate. We had examples of positions being confirmed by the Senate who reported to someone, who reported to someone, who reported to someone, who reported to someone else, all of them confirmed by advise and consent. So we've made a modest step in the direction of helping us exercise our constitutional duty under Article 2, Section 2 in a more effective way. Now, this resolution that we're debating today, unlike the bill this morning, does not remove one single person from the right of advise and consent. It expedites it in the following way. The President's nomination would come to the desk here. This is after the President has done all of its vetting. Then the relevant committee, let's say it's the Finance Committee or the Judiciary Committee, would go through its usual exercise of asking the nominee to answer questions and provide all of that information. When that nomination first comes here, that information is listed on the daily reports that we senators and staff read. Then when the information is all gathered by the relevant committee, that's indicated. Then there's a full 10 days for all of us to look at that. And if a single senator says, I'd like for this nominee to go on to the committee for a hearing and then for the traditional markup, that happens. But if all 100 senators say, I've looked at the information and it's not necessary to go to that extra time and expense and delay, then it moves to the executive calendar. The majority leader can bring it up whenever he or she wishes. So what we've done is, in 450 cases, approximately, we have affected the 1,400 nominations that are subject to advise and consent. We've either eliminated the requirement or we've expedited the process and made it possible for us to focus more attention on those deserving the most important attention. One other thing, and I see the senator from Oregon here, perhaps he wishes to speak, so I'll conclude my remarks with these. There's one other important aspect that we deal with here, and it may be the most important thing we can do, and that is to deal with, the first one I discussed was slowing down the trivialization of the Senate's advise and consent constitutional duty. That's what the first part of what we're doing does. The bill did that we've already passed. The resolution does that we're now debating. But the second aspect, and that was dealt with in the bill this morning, is dealing with the phenomenon of what I call innocent until nominated. We have developed a practice in this town of having the president select an otherwise unsuspecting distinguished citizen from Sioux City or Nashville or Bangor or Sacramento, and after going through an FBI check and other things, nominating that person for some position deserving advise and consent. By the time that person makes his or her way through all of the executive vetting process, by the time people pour over the tax returns and you answer multiple questions, often the same question asked in different ways, you've likely got an inaccuracy in there somewhere. Then your name is sent up here and the committee investigates you and asks you many of the same questions. You might have an inconsistency there. Then you show up for a publicized hearing with your family and you're sitting there and all of a sudden you're made out to be a common criminal because you made a mistake trying to decipher all these multiple forms. I've cited on this floor before the fact that former Majority Leader of the United States Senator Howard Baker and his wife, former Senator Nancy Kassebaum, went to Japan a few years ago as President George H.W. Bush's nominee as ambassador to Japan. Senator Baker was. Now, all of us knew Senator Baker. He was voted by the Senate the most admired senator by the Democrats as well as the Republicans when he was here. All the senators who were here at the time knew Senator Kassebaum, his wife. Yet Senator Baker told me he had to spend $250,000 in legal and accounting fees just to make his way carefully through the nomination process, all the executive vetting, and all of the vetting that the committees did, just so he would not make a mistake and he wouldn't be just so he wouldn't be subject to this innocent until nominated syndrome. What the bill we passed this morning does is very simple, very straightforward. It simply establishes a process. If the resolution in the bill should pass the House, if the bill should pass the House and be signed by the President, then we would have a working group of people appointed by the Senate, people appointed by the executive branch. We would work together to try to simplify the executive forms and the congressional forms that we use. See if we could have a smart form, a simple form that perhaps we could all use. And then, at least for the most part, a nominee, when asked to be nominated by the President, could fill out a single form, which could then be used by all of us who need to know basic information, such as what was your income last year. And we could ask the question, do we really need to know every single residence address that you ever had in your life if you're going to be on an advisory board, for example, for the United States? So that practice will have to be done with respect to the constitutional separation of powers. The executive branch will have to create its own documents. The Senate will have to create its own. But if we work together and we create a smart form, Senator Collins and Senator Lieberman have made important contributions to that process about how candidates are vetted, what kind of forms they fill out. We will not only have slowed down the trivialization of the Senate's duty of advice and consent by doing a better job of deciding who not to confirm, we'll also reduced the phenomenon of innocent until nominated, which has not only made it difficult for presidents to staff the government, delayed their ability to form a government, but unnecessarily harassed otherwise honorable men and women who are asked to serve their government. I thank the President. I yield the floor.
Madam President.
The Senator from Oregon.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that I be recognized for up to 10 minutes and Senator Collins be recognized for up to 10 minutes following my remarks. Further, that following Senator Collins' remarks, the Senate recess until 5:30 p.m.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. And I also ask unanimous consent to speak as if in morning business.
Without objection.
Well, we have a lot of discussion on the floor of this chamber about the challenge of our deficit and our debt. And these are indeed very important issues. And it's important to remember exactly how we got here, because it was only a decade ago that we were running large surpluses at the conclusion of the Clinton administration. In fact, these surpluses were so large that economists were starting to argue over just what would you do if we paid off our entire debt. Didn't there need to be instruments of last resort of great security like Treasury bonds? And didn't we need to preserve some deficit or debt in order to have that instrument available as a stabilizer in society? Well, wouldn't it be great to have that debate now? I remember being absolutely thrilled that we were going to turn over a debt-free America to our children. But what ensued? Well, President Bush had a different view. He said, you know what? Let's spend these surpluses we're generating, and let's do breaks for the best off in our society. Let's take and establish a new major program, Medicare Part D, and not pay for it. Let's embark on wars around this nation, around this planet, and not raise funds to pay for them. And the result was those tremendous surpluses were reduced to huge deficits in short order. Indeed, the 10-year projection went from a $5 trillion surplus to a $5 trillion shortfall. It's why some folks call President Bush the $10 trillion man, because he managed to do $10 trillion of damage to our economy. But that was only the beginning, because then deregulation of the mortgage industry resulted in predatory lending, liar loans, teaser rates that exploded after 2 years, kickbacks allowed to the originators so that they didn't even have any sort of fair presentation to families negotiating the most important financial instrument in their life, their home mortgage. And the meltdown that came from that extraordinary regulatory abuse resulted in another $5 trillion in debt. So that's how we got here. And now we have a certain pattern that we see on this floor in which members of this chamber, many of the members across the aisle, they stand up and say, we want to protect the programs for the best off, but we want to cut the basic programs that serve working Americans in our nation. And quite frankly, I think they have it exactly backwards. And if you think that I'm making this up, let's just review recent history. The December deal on the continuing resolution. This increased our debt $500 billion. And virtually every member across this aisle voted for it. I voted against it, a $500 billion increase. And a big chunk of that $500 billion increase in our debt was there because of the insistence on providing the continuation of the President Bush breaks for the best off in our society. Now, I don't know how one can rise and talk about cutting our investment in infrastructure in America I don't know how one can rise and talk about cutting support for those who are needing to get food from food banks, and at the same time be defending bonus breaks for the very best off in our society. The December deal was an anomaly because it's happened repeatedly. We had just a vote on oil and gas subsidies for some of the most powerful 5 companies in our economy, 5 very large oil and gas companies, and instead of getting rid of an anachronistic provision that was put there when the cost or the value of a barrel of oil was very low, and the oil industry said it needed to have some support, instead of cutting that, many in this chamber voted to continue it. Continue this break for a most powerful corporation, a break that was designed for a very different period of time when oil wasn't $100 a barrel, but was a fraction of that, $20 a barrel. And no, these aren't the only 2 recent cases. We have the attack on Medicare. Indeed, we have the plan that has been widely supported by my colleagues across the aisle, both in this chamber and across the building, in which they say, let's end Medicare as we know it because we need to save money, and we're going to do it on the backs of seniors. But we're not going to take a look at the breaks we voted in over the last quarter century for the best off in our society. Well, this systematic plan works like this. Because these breaks for the best off have been done through the tax code, and every American understands that whether you give somebody $5,000 in the tax code or you give them a $5,000 grant, it's exactly the same thing. We had that debate over the ethanol subsidies just recently. Everyone understands it's exactly the same thing. But by putting these programs for the wealthy and well-connected in the tax code, now my colleagues are rising to say, we will not touch those programs because they're in the tax code. Now, if they were in the appropriation bill, then we'd be willing to talk about it. But because we were clever enough to put them in the tax code, no, they're off limits. Now, this is a sophisticated way of saying the programs for the wealthy and well-connected in America are off limits, but the programs for working families, those are the ones we're going to cut. It's those programs for the hungry. It's those programs for the unemployed. It's that health care program for our seniors. It's the investment in infrastructure that will build America. Those are the ones we will cut. My colleagues and our citizens in the United States, we must have a national debate. A debate that doesn't employ this type of smoke and mirrors to try to protect the programs written for the wealthy and well-connected while attacking the programs for working families. That's unacceptable. And I and others will rise up on this floor and point it out time and time again that using that simple ruse by saying only the appropriation bill's on the table but not the tax bill, that is unacceptable. I'm going to tell you that it must not be that we make our kids' education more expensive by diminishing Pell Grants, that we make our parents' health care more expensive by obliterating Medicare as we know it, that we impoverish the future of this nation by not investing in our infrastructure while continuing to defend the programs that were developed for the best off, the wealthy and well-connected over the last 25 years, and saying those are off the table. They must be on the table. We must fight for an America that works for working Americans. Thank you, Madam President.